Hi, my name is Pip. I work as a food and textiles technician in the AD&T department, and the book I'm talking about today is the Darren Shan saga, specifically the first book, which is called Cirque du Freak. The book Cirque du Freak is about a boy called Darren Shan, who also is the same name as the author, and he is forced to become a vampire's assistant, or half vampire, to save his best friend. And then the whole saga follows his life and where he goes and his adventures and any perils he meets. But the first book is about the lead up to him becoming a vampire, and him and his best friend Steve going to a freak show called the Cirque du Freak and then meeting their first vampire there. So this is one of my favourite parts of the book, where Darren and his friend Steve are at the freak show and they first see Mr. Crepsley, who is a vampire, and you don't know it yet, but he becomes one of the main protagonists for the whole book. So he performs in the freak show with a giant spider that he manages to get to do tricks, and it's right at the start of chapter 12. So It is not true that all tarantulas are poisonous, Mr. Crepsley said. He had a deep voice. I managed to tear my eyes away from Steve and train them on the stage. Most are as harmless as the spiders you find anywhere in the world, and those which are poisonous normally only have enough poison in them to kill very small creatures. But some are deadly, he went on. Some can kill a man with one bite. They are rare and only found in extremely remote areas, but they do exist. I have one such spider, he said, and opened the door of the cage. For a few seconds nothing happened, but then the largest spider I had ever seen crawled out. It was green and purple and red, with long hairy legs and a big fat body. I wasn't afraid of spiders, but this one looked terrifying. The spider walked forward slowly, then its legs bent and it lowered its body as though waiting for a fly. Madame Octa has been with me for several years, Mr. Crepsley said. She lives far longer than ordinary spiders. The monk who sold her to me said some of her kind live to be 20 or 30 years old. She is an incredible creature, both poisonous and intelligent. While he was speaking, one of the blue-hooded people let a goat onto the stage. It was making a frightening bleating noise and kept trying to run. The hooded person tied it to the table and left. The spider began moving when it saw and heard the goat. It crept to the edge of the table where it stopped, as if awaiting an order. Mr. Crepsley produced a shiny tin whistle, he called it a flute, from his trouser pocket and blew a few short notes. Madame Octa immediately leapt through the air and landed on the goat's neck. The goat gave a leap when the spider landed and began bleating loudly. Madame Octa took no notice, hung on and moved a few centimetres closer to the head. When she was ready, she bared her fangs and sunk them deep into the goat's neck. The goat froze and its eyes went wide. It stopped bleating and a few seconds later toppled over, as though it was dead, but then realised it was still breathing. This flute is how I control Madame Octa, Mr. Crepsley said, and I looked away from the fallen goat. He waved the flute slowly above his head. Though we have been together for such a long time, she is not a pet, and would surely kill me if I ever lost her. The goat is paralysed, he said. I have trained Madame Octa not to kill outright with her first bite. Obviously I'd recommend this book for other people, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it, but the reason is it's one of the first books that I read that I just couldn't put down, and from the moment I picked it up I think I finished it in about an hour. Now, I've always been a really, really avid reader, but I know a lot of people, and I had a lot of friends at school who weren't, and even I managed to encourage some of them who really were interested in it. The whole series is 12 books long, and I've managed to read each one 10, but that's because I really enjoyed them. But one of the best things about them is it's an interesting story that, yeah, it's talking about vampires, but it doesn't just follow every single other vampire story you've ever read. It's not just a cliche kind of Dracula thing. It's not got things like turning into bats and massive fangs. Darren Shan, the author, really thinks about it beforehand and has questioned the kind of original legend, and you end up with things that are much more interesting, like super speed and super strength. and still plenty of gore in it as well. They are really easy to read. Darren Shan himself is actually a dyslexic writer, and he writes in a way that is actually even listed as suitable for people that are kind of reluctant readers and dyslexic. This book's and the series has been such an inspiration to me, because when I was a kid, I loved reading, but it wasn't until I read these that I started liking the idea of writing. And it's kind of nice to have some horror for kids that's suitable but not boring as well. So that's why I'd recommend it to other people. They're not boring. And it's a long series, so you can really get into it and get to know the characters as well. So, yeah. How am I supposed to do this enthusiastically? I don't want to smile too much. Someday I will sound violent. We've resorted to a children's programme.